Welcome back to Book Break. I have got two very interesting books I want to talk to you about today. Two pretty different books, but with a common theme. So the books are Once a Monster by Robert Dinsdale and Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. And what these books have in common is that they each take a monster from Greek mythology, the Minotaur and Medusa respectively, and flip their stories upside down so that you end up rooting for the monster. They're really clever books. I think you're going to love them. I'm going to start by talking about Once a Monster. So a recap on who the Minotaur was, or what the Minotaur was. The Minotaur was a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. And the story of how this being came into existence does involve a woman sleeping with a bull, so let's not think too hard about it. But the Minotaur came into existence and was instantly imprisoned by his stepfather Minos into a labyrinth, this underground cave that was designed so no one could find their way out of it. And the Minotaur lived in there and he fed on human flesh, because separately to that, Minos had ordered the city of Athens to send him 7 young men and 7 young women as a sacrifice every year, or every 7 years, or every 9 years. It changes in the different versions of the story, but either way, at regular intervals, these 14 young people were sacrificed to Minos, and this was payment, this was revenge, because an Athenian had caused the death of Minos's own son. And so these sacrificed young people were led into the labyrinth and abandoned there so that the Minotaur could kill and eat them. And the Minotaur is most famous from the story of Theseus, who is basically the original Katniss Everdeen. He volunteered as tribute to be one of these 14 young people so that he could go and try and defeat the Minotaur, which he did, but only by being a total knob and getting all of the help from Minos' daughter Ariadne, who helped him defeat the Minotaur and escape from the impossible labyrinth, only for him to abandon her on an island. Men are never very nice in Greek myth. So all of that brings us to this book, Once a Monster, which imagines the story slightly differently. What if the Minotaur hadn't died and he had survived through the centuries until we meet him in this book, which is set in Victorian London, and we are first introduced to the Minotaur when he is discovered washed up on the banks of the Thames, half dead after having been robbed and beaten and left to die in the Thames. And as this book is all set in London, let's actually go and take a look. It is quite loud along here, so I'm hoping you can hear me. I have come to the banks of the River Thames, which is where the book starts, where a lot of the action takes place. So this is where we meet our main character, a 12-year-old girl called Nell, who belongs to this group of mudlarkers. They are children who are led by a terrifying figure called Mr. Murdstone. He's a very scary man. He's a kind of Bill Fagin-like character. So he houses and protects these children in exchange for their mudlarkers. They scour the banks of the River Thames looking for treasure that he can sell. Mudlarking is still an activity people do today. I actually just walked past a woman looking for something. I don't know what she was looking for. Just hope she finds something exciting. So it's here while searching for treasure that Nell comes across the Minotaur. Here is where she finds him half dead in the water and tries to save him. But it isn't long before Mr. Murdstone discovers his hiding place and instantly starts to think about how he can exploit the Minotaur and his strange appearance in order to make himself rich. So Mr. Murdstone is very much the real villain of this story. He may not be the monster, but he's the one you should be scared of. I'm going to turn around and go back the way I came because it gets very muddy in that direction. So the book is so atmospheric. I have not spent very much time in this part of London, definitely not down on this beach, but I feel like I've been here because the book does such a good job of bringing it to life in such a dark, sinister way. And actually this part of East London is fascinating, it has so much dark history. I made a whole video for Book Break, which I'll link to below, about the dark history of East London. Such a great place to set a book. It's such a great place to walk around and feel like you're a real part of history. So the book really brings that to life, and overall the book is really about that kind of battle between good and evil that exists in everyone. So it challenges our perception of who the monster is, who the villain is, but also forces us to confront the fact that we all have a little bit of monster in us somewhere. So now I need to go and try and find where those stairs were that took me down to this beach. It wasn't totally easy. It's quite a slippery path, so I'm going to need both my hands back. But if you like the sound of a book set in Victorian London, if you like a bit of Victorian history mixed with a bit of otherworldly mythology and a book that will make you think, I recommend Once a Monster. I've actually just come for one more pit stop on my way back to the office, because behind me now is the St George in the East Church, which is another key location in the book. So while I was in the area, I thought I should show you. This church is where the Minotaur comes for a place of calm and a place of contemplation over that question I was talking about of the battle between good and evil that is going on inside him. And like the sense I get standing here is so different from where I was a minute ago, and that really sums up the two different kind of feelings that you get in the book. Down by the Thames there is this place of survival and a real sense of fear, and then here there is this place of peace and introspection, and you get both of those really beautifully in the book. It's also just a gorgeous church, so I wanted to show you. They won't let me in though, so no calm and contemplation for me today. Back to the office it is. I think that's because I was trying to get in the back way. I've just seen the front door is in fact open.
Hi, my name's Natasha. I'm marketing manager on the Pan Comms team here at Pan Macmillan, and I had the absolute pleasure on working on the marketing of this amazing book, Once a Monster by Robert Dinsdale. So this is a really kind of unique reimagining of the myth of the Minotaur. And for me, it's kind of the perfect cross-genre read. It's a bit of historical fiction with a dash of fantasy and obviously that mythical retelling element as well. But I wouldn't say that you have to, love Greek mythology to enjoy the book. It's a perfect kind of introduction to that as well. And yeah, I absolutely love it. It's just the perfect dose of escapism. And I think it's written so beautifully. There are lots of phrases that really kind of just stopped me in my tracks whilst reading it. And yeah, just completely immerses you in that dark London Victorian world that Robert Dinsdale sets in the book. I also felt really fond of the character Minos. I think Robert Dinsdale does a great job of kind of showing all facets of his character and really explores his own kind of internal battle between what good and bad is. And I think there are some hints at kind of themes around toxic masculinity in that as well, which adds a really kind of great other dimension to the book. As someone who dances as well, I really loved the kind of magical world that Nell's exploring in her dream to be a ballerina kind of alongside that. And yeah, I just think it's a beautiful, totally moving and heartwarming story of love and friendship, but ultimately about humanity as well and what it means to be human. And yeah, I think it's the perfect book to get lost in.
Now the other book that fits with this theme is Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and the monster that we're going to get a whole new look at in this book is Medusa. So Medusa was a gorgon with snakes for hair and a gaze that could turn anyone who looked directly at her to stone. So she was a pretty terrifying figure in the stories I heard when I was growing up. But in Stone Blind, what Natalie Haynes has done is retold this story, gone back to piece together different details from different versions of the original myths to point out that Medusa wasn't actually much of a monster at all. In fact, her backstory is more of a tragedy. Medusa was actually raped by the god Poseidon in the goddess Athena's temple, and this sacrilege made Athena so angry that she cursed Medusa. Seems like the wrong person to be directing her anger at, but she did. She cursed her and she turned her hair to snakes, and she gave her this powerful gaze that meant she could never look directly at the people that she loved anymore. It was horrific. So having given us that backstory, Natalie Haynes then retells the most famous story that I had heard of Medusa from, which is the story of Perseus. You may also know him as Percy Jackson. He's the inspiration behind Percy Jackson. But Perseus was sent on a quest to fetch the head of a gorgon, Medusa. And I always heard this story growing up as this heroic act where he had to figure out how to trick Medusa, how to fight her without looking directly at her by using a mirror and creeping up on her when she was sleeping. And yay go Perseus was the story I always heard. But reading it in Stone Blind, Natalie Haynes turns this completely on its head, and so you are rooting for the monster Medusa, and Perseus comes across as I'm not allowed to swear in these videos, so I can't use the most appropriate word for him, but he comes across as a coward and a not very nice man. The book has this really great combination of fierce feminist anger and humour. Natalie Haynes is a comedian and her writing is so witty, and so the book is a really fun combination of giving you those different emotions. There are some very funny scenes, particularly with the goddess Athene talking to Perseus, who she clearly also thinks is that word that I'm not going to say in this video, and so those sections are really funny. But there's also scenes that are really moving and really powerful and will make you upset and angry and vengeful. This retelling not only makes you root for the monster, but actually makes you question and challenge what makes us call something or someone a monster in the first place. It's usually because it's something we're afraid of because we don't understand it. I've actually made a whole video before dedicated to Stone Blind, so I will link to that below, including where you can see some of the celebrations that we had in our office when the hardback of this book came out. So you can click through to learn even more about that book.
Hi, I'm Elle and I am the head of marketing at Picador Books, which is part of Macmillan, and I am lucky enough to work with Natalie Haynes on her incredible books, both fiction and non-fiction, about Greek mythology. And Stone Blind, Medusa's story, is one of my favourite reads of the year. I recommend it to everybody, and it's the story of Medusa, but it's also the story of the people she loved, and the people who loved her, and the people who hurt her. Whether you're a fan of Greek mythology or not, there is something in here that will resonate with you. And the quote we've put on the back actually really sums up the story for me. It says, "So to mortal men we are monsters, because of our flight, our strength. They fear us, so they call us monsters." And that is kind of basically every woman ever, I think. And this is Medusa in her own words, but it's also the Medusa that was loved like a sister and a daughter, and it's angry and funny and heartbreaking. I think you will cry, and you will be so, there'll be points in the book where you're so filled with rage because what we think about Medusa is really not what happened to her at all. And Natalie has a very unique way of making characters and people that are thousands of years old and have talons and wings and divine power seem really, really relatable. And yeah, I loved everything about it.
So both of these are really, really interesting books. Both of them make you challenge some of your assumptions about who is a monster, about who is good or evil, about ourselves and whether we've got a little bit of a monster in all of us. So that's why I love these kinds of books, and I would love your recommendations. If you have any more books that make you root for the monster, do let me know in the comments below. And in the meantime, I will link here to that video I mentioned on Stone Blind, and also a video I made a few years ago on the best villains in literature, because let's face it, reading about the villains is pretty fun. And I'll see you next time.